This is Sal Valencia with Edward Jones here in Winston-Salem. If you guys have any questions, concerns, or want to know where to start with your financial journey, just give me a call. I start with a conversation. We have a cup of coffee, and we'll just take things from there. And so a lot of stuff's going on in the world, and if you just want some clarity, we can just start with a cup of coffee. Sal with Edward Jones, give my office a call. My number is 336-748-1271, and I'll talk to you soon.
Welcome to the Health Geeks Book Club podcast. Listen in as Kristen Norton and Eleanor Russell review all those great health and wellness books you've been wanting to read or you have read and want to talk about. Here's Kristen and Eleanor.
Hey, Eleanor.
Well, hello, Kristen.
At the time we're recording, it's February, and at Well Balanced Nutrition, we celebrate Heart Health Month. And it was just Valentine's Day, so this is kind of a month all about the heart.
It really is. And I see a lot of the color red around, and I don't understand that. But I do have a quote that I would like to share with you.
She says as her coffee mug is red.
Yes, it is. I see red. That's what I'm saying. We can interpret that lots of ways. But here's the quote I want to share with you guys today. We're facing an unprecedented challenges in our overall well-being, the relentless pace of modern life, evolving social norms, and an increasing sense of disconnection, and this is creating a widespread health crisis. This presents a unique opportunity to rethink our approach to health. And Kristen, we've been talking about health and wellness and what it means and how we address it. But then this author that we're going to be talking about goes on and says, we must adopt a comprehensive approach that appreciates the interplay between various aspects of our well-being. Beyond disease and treatment and symptom management, it involves encouraging healthy lifestyles, emotional resilience, positive social interactions, and spiritual growth. Embracing these comprehensive understanding of health is vital as we face contemporary challenges.
Comprehensive is the right word. This book goes into a lot of detail. Today, we're talking about Just One Heart, a cardiologist's guide to healing, health, and happiness. Tired of feeling stuck in your health journey? At Well Balanced Nutrition, we understand that achieving your health goals isn't just about what you eat. It's about overcoming the mental roadblocks holding you back. Our team of expert nutrition coaches is here to guide you every step of the way, helping you break through mindset barriers and reach your full potential. Don't let mindset barriers stand in the way of your health and happiness. Call Well Balanced Nutrition today and start your journey to a better you.
It's by Jonathan Fisher. He's an MD and an FACC.
I didn't know this when we picked it out, but did you know he's local?
I was going to say, isn't that fun? Huntersville near Charlotte.
Yeah.
And Novant, one of
Yes.
our large medical conglomerates here in our local community. The book was published, FACC, do you know what that is? That's a family... family...
I just say family doctor in my head. I never knew what it really stood for.
Yeah, association. I looked it up, and I thought I'd written that down somewhere. But yeah, well, okay, there you go. So anyway.
How about fellow of the American College of Cardiology?
There you go.
Oh, so
Yeah.
I was off. It was not family. Okay.
Yeah, fellow. And that's
Fellow.
a pretty prestigious little group of people. He's a very well-educated fellow. He went to Harvard. He practiced at Mount Sinai. Those of us in the medical community appreciate those credentials. And he's currently holding an office of well-being and resiliency in the Novant organization. And I thought, well, that's a new department. But the book was published by M Manuscripts Press. And you know how I always like to dig into, okay, we've talked about who wrote this stuff, but who publishes these things? Because it's kind of important for us.
Who believed it enough to put it on paper?
There you go. Yeah. And so this is an author community. So in a way... I looked up this group. If I wanted to write a book, they would help me take my idea, get it into form, and move it on to publication, and then distribute and see about getting me on that New York list of bestsellers.
Okay.
So anyway, that's a little bit about how this came into our hands. Although some other important people have read it and commented on it. If you've ever heard of Dean Ornish or Arianna Huffington, or Richard Carmana, who was the Surgeon General for a while. So, it's been read by some pretty interesting people.
Yeah, he has a lot of praise in the front and back of the book.
And then there's you and me. We read it, right? And we're pretty important too, right?
That's right. That's right. We're going to share our takeaways today.
As far as I'm concerned, nothing else matters besides the two of you.
Oh, yeah. And you can get the book from our bookstore if you want to read along with us.
Absolutely.
All right.
It's right there. I put it there myself.
Okay. Then let's dig into this a little bit. Kristen, were you surprised? And maybe I'm the one that's surprised. There wasn't a whole lot in here about the anatomy and physiology of the heart and all the chemical pathways. There was a little bit. I mean, he did 4 or 5 pages on that. But this is a book about the heart from a cardiologist that's not talking about how do we go in there and figure out how the cardiac cell functions or the endothelial lining of the heart, is functioning, or if it's clotted up, or all the things that could go wrong with it. He doesn't spend a lot of time on that.
Nor does he spend a lot of time on nutrition or fitness, which are often the things that are touted for the physical aspects of the heart.
I agree, but he does put a disclaimer in there that says his ideas are based on a foundation that you do have proper nutrition and physical activity and adequate sleep.
Yes.
I mean, these are fundamental baseline things that we should be paying attention to. But he
doesn't discount them, but it's not his focus.
Exactly, yeah. And so he does mention it, so it's not like he ignored it.
Right.
But I do like that we're talking about this heart that beats every day, a whole bunch of times. And I've had people do the counts on, if you have 60 beats per minute or 100 beats per minute, how many is that in a day and a year? It's millions for, a year, billions even. And we don't even think about it. But if it's not pumping, we're not in good shape.
Right. So if he doesn't talk about the physical part, of it being this important organ, what does he talk about? You're probably wondering.
Yeah, and he talks about the history of how people used to think the way he's thinking now, but then around 1600 and the Enlightenment, Descartes and all these people come along, and William Harvey, and they sort of separate the science from the holistic approach of the heart.
This is Sal Valencia with Edward Jones here in Winston-Salem. If you guys have any questions, concerns, or want to know where to start with your financial journey, just give me a call. It starts with a conversation. We have a cup of coffee, and we'll just take things from there. And so a lot of stuff's going on in the world, and if you just want some clarity, we can just start with a cup of coffee. Sal with Edward Jones, give my office a call. My number is 336-748-1271, and I'll talk to you soon.
And I think the bottom line of this book for me is it's a book about how to live.
Mm-hmm.
We know our hearts kill most of us. I mean, if they don't work, cardiovascular disease is
a number one killer.
Yeah.
I thought death was the number one killer.
You said that before. We know that.
Yeah. Well, it's the number one killer for women. I know that.
It's the etiology of death.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that idea of all of a sudden we got so focused on the science and the therapy and the, interventions in our allopathic medical world, which this guy's challenging a little bit.
Yeah, and he brings up Brené Brown in his book, but the word wholehearted living comes up for me. When you said living, not just living wholeheartedly. Mm-hmm. And he kind of puts more words around that. But
yeah, and we've read several books about that. The one that came to mind most recently is The Plan that we read by Kendra Hadachi, and she's talking about live. Part of her whole thing about organizing your time is you got to live. So this guy's talking about how to have a quality life. And he talks about your heart's just not this physical thing. It's also emotional and spiritual. Mm-hmm. So where do you want to go from there?
Well, I think it's important to talk about Jonathan and his past, his journey. Mm-hmm. So, he was experiencing burnout, he says, before he even knew what that was. So he came from a family of very smart people and was expected to be very successful in academics. And I think with that, there was a kind of lack of emotional intelligence, or he just didn't pick that up.
He said he was geeky, had glasses and got bullied.
Got bullied.
Yeah.
So I think this excerpt from an article I read about him is worth sharing. So he says, beginning in medical school, there were times where I would be crying in the stairwell after a patient would die, and no one was there to talk to me about the inner life of a doctor, about existential life and death issues we deal with. And over a decade of these unprocessed feelings started to build up inside me and create a sense of exhaustion, isolation, and confusion about whether these feelings were normal or not. It goes to say that feeling depressed or anxious can often be seen as a weakness in the medical culture. And he says it creates a stigma around sharing that we are not superheroes. We are human beings, and if we could be more human, we could be better doctors than we are right now. And so I think that was a really great way of sharing, like, his journey started personally, figuring out how to be happier in his career, which I think for doctors is a huge issue, right? That he's right. There's not a lot of support in some systems in the medical system,
and has not been there historically, but it may be coming along now.
I think
because
so.
People are beginning to address these ideas,
like him.
Yeah.
He focused on himself, and now he is focusing on teaching other clinicians this wholehearted living, to how to prevent burnout, and doing it with his patients as well. So he's kind of come full circle with his...
Yes, putting it into practice. Mm-hmm. I was in a group of retired nurses recently, and it was funny. They made a comment that I think is relevant to this. They said, for the typical person, they see somebody die maybe once or twice, in a family. The nurses see it every day. It's like they lose somebody or somebody's sick and suffering, and they go home and come right back into it. So most of us don't have the steady diet that these medical professionals or the people that care for us when we're sick are exposed to, and it's toxic. And he talks about, their situation, but how relevant it is to us as the patient or the person as well.
Yeah.
To maybe reduce those encounters in the medical system.
And we've talked about or read books by other authors who are in the medical system and they leave because they also felt burnout. And I just feel a sense of gratitude that he kind of stuck around so that he can maybe transform the medical system so that, A, there's less burnout for the providers, and B, he seems to offer a more holistic approach for his patients that... And we've talked on previous podcasts, we would love to see more of the integrative approach with providers so that we can trust them more and we can advocate for ourselves more within those visits.
And he makes himself vulnerable by telling us of his depressive history.
Absolutely.
He admits, I have a problem, which
and I think that's
is
fantastic because he's saying that it's hard for a lot of people training to be doctors to be vulnerable.
Yeah, you got to be sharp. You got to be the one that knows it all.
Right.
This book was organized in an interesting way. He starts out with the state of our hearts, and he does go over a little bit of science of that. But then he has these 7 timeless traits of the heart that he then develops the ideas on. But he knows that stress hurts the heart. So he's talked about his depressive episodes and the workloads and the sadness that he has to deal with, the suffering. So we know that hurts, but there's also a genetic component that we all have, and he admits that too. But then he says it's the lifestyle choices or the situation that can contribute to what he calls either a broken heart or a healthy heart.
He, we often hear the mind-body connection. He introduces it as the mind-heart connection and paints the picture that, our emotional states lead to physical symptoms.
Absolutely.
And ties in, like you said, our spiritual, our emotional, and our social health and how that impacts the physical parts of our heart.
Yeah, he talks about these things that are heartbreakers, like anxiety, depression, anger, hostility, loneliness, grief, discrimination. And he says that 52% higher chance of developing heart disease if you're struggling with those. 52. That's 1 out of 2 of us.
Yeah.
And we know that mental health in America right now is not really good. And a lot of people are on medications for anxiety and depression, right?
Right.
So we know people are struggling with this, and it's definitely related to our heart health.
So in, the Heartbreakers chapter, he talks about, extreme or prolonged cases of these distressing emotions and how they're causing harm. Things like anger, hostility, anxiety, depression, grief, and loneliness, and how those things can just wreak havoc if we don't manage them and handle them.
And admit that we have them. And that's the thing about self-awareness is huge. A lot of us just get in a downward spiral and you can't see your way out.
Yeah. I love the Name It to Tame It. I first read about that in a parenting book by the author that he mentions. I think it's Dan Siegel. But yeah, he's like, if you can't call out what emotion you're feeling, that's the first issue.
Yeah, and remember we read the book about how emotions are made?
How emotions are made.
Which opened up my thinking about emotions. And it comes back to me because what I consider my emotions may not be what you consider yours. And I might not be able to interpret what I see on your face or your body language appropriately. And then I don't interact with you properly or in a successful manner, let's say. He has this idea about our ability to connect with others, our ability to respond to each moment we encounter is what he calls the thought-action repertoire. And so that our thinking, he's talking about heart and body, mind. And so that thought thing, when I feel depressed, then I think I'm depressed, and then I might start thinking down those roads. So the idea of reforming the way we think is something that came out of here too. We need to cultivate more what we call heart wakers. He has the heart breakers, and the heart wakers are essential to our heart health. They're things like gratitude, optimism, generosity, joy, laughter, purpose, compassion, love, and these will enable us to discover new thoughts to replace those other thoughts. And I thought that was a pretty cool thing. And it ends up being a preventive measure against cardiovascular disease.
Yeah. So you know what made me really happy?
What?
When I was going over these heart wakers, I'm like, we've read books on just about every one of these heart wakers. And, we do this because we love reading books, but we want to make a difference. We want to share our insights that we glean from these books. And hopefully you can get these takeaways too, whether or not you read it. And I'm like, look, we're making a difference in people's heart health. So, mindfulness and gratitude, we've talked about those practices. We read a book about self-compassion.
Do you remember the money book, Happy Money?
Happy Money.
He talks about generosity, and how it makes a huge difference if we just remember to be generous.
Yeah. And our very first book, Jay Shetty's book, talked a lot about purpose.
Right.
And that's a heart waker. Hey, you know how he opened up that section, the rabbit effect?
No, I don't remember. Tell me again.
Okay, let me share because that was really neat. Let me get to it. Okay, so in 1978, Dr. Robert Neerum made an accidental discovery in his rabbit laboratory that revealed hidden forces influencing the health of our hearts. So he was studying, the blood vessels and elevated cholesterol level in these rabbits.
Really sciencey, Kristen.
Really sciencey. And one subgroup of rabbits on a high-fat diet exhibited significantly healthier blood vessels with 60% fewer fatty deposits and a substantially lower risk of heart attack than the others, despite having the same average cholesterol levels, heart rate, and blood pressure. So why? Well, they dug in a little bit and found that a compassionate young postdoctorate student had been responsible for tending to the rabbits that had developed less artery blockage. They found she had treated those rabbits with love and affection during their interactions, and now they call it the rabbit effect.
Oh, okay. I do remember that. Isn't that great?
Isn't that fun?
And
So just testament to, kindness, how big of a deal that could be, just, helping us overcome some of our physical.
Yeah, and being generous with your time and resources for someone else's benefit.
Yeah.
And it makes me think of our sponsor, Sal.
Yeah.
His heart is getting a really good dose of prevention today because he's generously sponsoring us. Thank you, Sal.
Do what I can.
You're awesome, Sal.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do any of you have heart problems?
That we know of?
Yeah. Have you been diagnosed, set through, experienced heart problems.
I've had a broken heart emotionally. But
I
yes,
have not.
But tell us about your experience, because I think you are
If you would.
I think that's why you brought this up.
It was, yeah. So in 2012, at the age of 41, I had triple bypass heart surgery. I had blockage, 99% blockage in one artery. I had 97% in the widowmaker, and then 75 in the third. And funny thing, in hindsight, and even my doctor, my general practitioner, we don't know that it was my heart that was giving me problems, oddly enough. But we think that the real culprit was my gallbladder. But even with the gallbladder, it showed that I needed that. And I'm not going to say I'm off the hook, but they must have been satisfied, because after 3 years, I haven't been back to my cardiologist since then.
Wonderful.
But all my numbers and stuff are checking out at the doctor, which, is only plus tax, scraping the surface of any real symptoms. But so far, everything's good. So.
And in that encounter, did you find anybody asking you about how you were living your life with wisdom or steadiness or openness?
Well, kind of, because what I was getting at with all that was, I think doing things for other people, even whenever I was going through all that, and I tried to get back into the swing of things as quickly as possible. And my thing is every day, who can I help the most today?
Getting out of yourself to some other.
Yeah. I think that that was also leading to my healing and getting back to a strength that
and maybe not as fearful.
Right. I mean, because I'm like, if I can survive that, I can pretty much survive anything. Well, I'm not going to say I'm invincible, but I could get through a lot of stuff. And it just changed my outlook. I said I treated myself poorly for 41 years. I want to spend the next 41 taking care of myself.
Gives you perspective.
Yeah.
And you have what I would call a warm heart, but I also know that you have love in your life and compassion and empathy. I mean, you have a very substantial partner, right?
Yes. And without her, I would not be here.
You think so?
Oh, absolutely. I know so. Because I would have continued down my destructive ways. However, behind every good man, great man, or whatever, is a even better woman, I think. And she kept me sane. She kept me on the right path. But the things, the kindness and thing, that's all up to me. But the perspective, a lot of it came from her.
And Jonathan Fisher would really appreciate that story you just shared. Thank you for doing that. He says that we should have a daily routine that will help us develop these timeless traits that we're going to talk a little bit more about. But he says, first of all, you have to understand the trait deeply. Like if you're going to work on that warm heart, you have to understand it. But a regular self-reflection, to set aside some time each day to think about it. And, when you have a partner that helps you do that when you're not accustomed to doing it, that accountability kind of is a wonderful thing. And we can find that you don't have to have a living partner. There are just other ways you can have access to that prompt to help you take time to reflect on, just be still even.
You have to remember your friends want you around.
Yeah.
So your friends can hold you accountable
Absolutely,
for this stuff too.
Yeah. And then there's the idea of visualization, where we make a clear mental image that helps us. Like you said, I want to be healthy from now on. I don't want to live the way I can do anything now, so I want to do it. And then affirmations, where you repeat daily affirmations. We've read about the power of the word, that when you talk to yourself and say, Eleanor, you're going to have a great day today. Just typically, I'm going to have a great day because I heard it and I believed it, or my cells heard it. And then the idea to engage in relevant activities that nurture what you're trying to develop in your life. I mean, the guy's got some great ideas, and he says seek feedback. So your regular, visit for so long, you got feedback from your science community saying, hey, your markers look good.
Yeah.
Keep doing what you're doing. Hey, if you're as interested in prevention as I am, contact me, Eleanor Russell, at 360health, 4u.com. Whether you're interested in financial wellness or physical health products, 360 Health invites you to become part of our community.
So that's the beginning, where he opens up into the 7 traits of a healthy heart.
And what are those
that go
again?
beyond physical health. He has a chapter for each of them, but there's steadiness, wisdom, openness, wholeness, courage, lightness, and warmth. Did I get them right?
Yeah, and he says those are going to help buffer us against negative emotion. And negative emotion creates stress, creates a whole cortisol problem with stress chemically, and your body responds to signaling and then shuts itself around crazy, spends its energy improperly. What did you think about, was there one of those that you want to dig into a little bit?
They're all so packed with good information that I thought, how are we going to distill all this into a podcast?
Yeah. And should we even try?
I don't know. I think you should read the book and at least follow him. He seems like someone that's really worth knowing. He's doing a lot of great work, and either pick up the book or listen to maybe some interviews by him. But I think he's got a lot of great wisdom. Yeah.
His trait on steadiness kind of circles back to how I opened our discussion with that discussion about contemporary society and the stresses it puts on us. And in his steadiness discussion, he says, embrace diastole. And I said, okay, we're going back to science. I like this. There's systole and diastole are the 2 phases of the cardiac cycle. And the diastole is the relaxation phase. And we've read a couple of books on rest and how important it is to relax. And most Americans are not getting their dose of that in a significant way because we're always on. You got to be there, you got to go. And I was thinking about in this wintertime of these young parents with these children who are not in school because it's a holiday and then it's a snow day and it's an ice day and then they get sick and they're home and and these schedules have been so disrupted for these parents that the stress level's got to be out the wazoo on how do we get them fed and how do we keep our jobs going. And so I think he's onto something. We have to manage stress, so we have to reframe our thoughts and adopt some healthier coping strategies when those things come up. And if you don't have those tools, you're probably not going to navigate it as well. And he's giving you some really good ideas in his discussion here about how he says you need to call in the doctors, the DRSs, meaning you need to diffuse and engage with whatever emotion you're feeling at the time. Like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? My kids are screaming at me and my boss is calling. You got to diffuse that. But then you have to relax to address the physical and cognitive stress that you're under. And then you got to soothe or surf. And the soothe or surf was the waves of emotion because they're going to come and go. And just surf it, I mean, the wave will come and it'll go. Don't say, this is it, not going to be, I got to stay up here forever because that's going to kill you.
Yeah.
That'll throw you into the shock right there.
Yeah, he describes quite a bit of therapy-like practices. So I can tell he's been through his own therapy, and now he knows a lot about
the tools.
The tools,
yeah. And he's sharing them, and he's telling you why they're important.
Yeah, it's great. He has a lot of breath work activities in here. I love that. From diaphragmatic. Thank you. Box breathing and 4-7-8 breathing. Talks about enhancing vagal tone and how, essentially tying this all back to the heart, these things can slow our heart rate, open our blood vessels, bring a sense of calm to our
have
body.
a biological response.
And that's what our heart needs.
Yes, to keep going for all those beats we want it to do.
Yeah. Anything else in that section? I've got something that's a couple chapters ahead.
Oh, no, yeah, no.
Okay.
Go.
In the courage section, something really stood out to me.
Courage?
In the courage.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. This just feels very
The
timely.
lion and the Wizard of Oz.
This just feels really timely, y'all. Okay.
Fill 'em up.
Remember, the power to make a difference doesn't reside solely in extraordinary individuals. It resides within each of us, regardless of our level of determination. Each act of kindness, voice raised against injustice, and step toward a more just world contributes to the collective wave of positive change. Our collective efforts, fueled by unwavering conviction, will ultimately shape a brighter future.
Yeah, which he's all for.
Yeah.
I mean, that's his whole purpose of writing the book, I think, is to make things better.
Yeah, let's work together.
Yeah, on that courage thing, I loved the fact that he split out all the different kinds of courage rather than just what, when you ask somebody what is courage, I thought of the line in The Wizard of Oz. But he says there's physical courage, you go into battle, I guess, I'm going. Moral courage, emotional, intellectual, spiritual. You were just talking about social courage, creative courage, existential courage. I mean, he develops those ideas, and it's like, oh, there are a lot of dimensions to that one word that we sometimes use. It might be able to think it through a little better.
And then he walks you through strategies to develop and strengthen. So first of it is understand it, which is good that, we can look at it in different ways. Build self-confidence, face and manage your fear, adopt a growth mindset, which he spends a good time. This is sidebar, right? Like he'll go into growth mindset. He goes into these little sections or paragraphs that almost could be on the side because it's like, oh, this important thing here, before I continue on, you need to know about this in research. So growth mindset was one of them. Foster conviction and ethical principles, utilize strengths, navigate life's challenges with courage. The other kind of sidebar thing that stood out to me is, unlike some other authors that I've criticized a bit for leaving this out, he does put in discrimination, social economical status.
Yeah,
things
we've mentioned that's something that not all authors have incorporated in. Yeah, it is real.
It's real.
Yeah, it's real.
And he has a section in that. He also, I like about him, he'll, include the research of medications for depression, and he'll also say exercise is a wonderful tool as well. So he doesn't exclude anything. He includes everything that could be helpful.
Yeah.
I liked that. Okay, anyway, back. What else stood out to you in the
Well, we
traits of the heart?
could tease a lot of this. I would just say I think it was a surprising book for me, not knowing. I actually don't know how we got this on our list. It has a beautiful cover. It's a pretty book. But it was a surprising read for me, and I thought, even though the author is a little strange, his personal history, and he was motivated a lot by his older sister who kind of took him under her wing, and then she had a terrible death, and he was devastated.
Yeah.
And so this grief journey. But I think it's a story of a professional who's trying to contribute to the betterment of, his patient team. And the rest of us can benefit from that. And it's a good read. And I think you'd have a conversation with people if you read this. It would provoke some conversation.
Especially on courage.
Yeah.
Because people think courage is just like the basic courageous part of it.
Right.
They don't think about like the ethical, the emotional, the moral. Like they don't think about that. They could be courageous, but fall short on other parts of courage as well.
Yeah, and you're a soccer coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, the courage that player has to actually put their all into it.
Mm-hmm.
That's one dimension. And then the child that stands up in the classroom and reads their poem, that's another kind of courage.
Yeah.
But we don't often recognize that. It's like, oh, they're little twerty little poet, you know. They're not a courageous warrior.
Even within soccer, there's a goalie that I think is the most courageous player because they're putting their body out there. And then you could have the strongest, most courageous defender out there that bodies everybody but will not go play goalie because he doesn't want to get hurt.
Right, exactly.
And so it's just different kinds of courage, right?
It is, yeah.
And I love that.
See, it provoked a conversation. He hadn't read the book yet. I like it.
And he's sharing this with clinicians too, which I love because he's showing them, look, there's science that does connect someone's stress management skills or social situation with how they're doing in their health management.
And their curriculum, when they study to become physicians, is all about the science and the intervention and the behavioral side of this is not, I don't think, acknowledged as strongly as it's going to be because it is a missing piece of why people are not getting better or why people are not being healthy or staying healthy in our country.
Right. So
these are things that will make a big difference.
Do you think clinicians or anybody in healthcare would enjoy reading this book and the insights?
I don't know.
I would say.
Did your husband read it?
He reads too many PubMed articles to have energy to come home and read.
And that's what I'm saying. They are so pushed to stay current with the medical literature, and this is not published in the medical literature as strongly, or the body of this is over in the psychology and social sciences, and they don't have time. And that's why building the practice team to incorporate and have referrals to these professionals that know this body of information may be, I'm just brainstorming here, might be a way to let us do better.
Yeah, I think working together. And also, he's done lots of seminars within Novant, and I think outside of Novant to help educate too. So
I think we would give it a thumbs up.
I agree.
Well, I guess take care of your heart, y'all. Practice some steadiness and learn your wisdom ways.
And stay open and mindful.
And have a light heart. Oh, there's a quote from G.F. Chesterton that says, "Angels can fly because they take themselves lightly." So go be an angel.
That's right. Well, I'm Kristen Norton, one of the registered dietitians at Well Balanced Nutrition. I invite you to visit our website and see if nutrition coaching might be for you. We invite you to fill out a form for a free Clarity coaching call if you want to have a discussion with one of us.
And I'm Eleanor Russell, another health geek, and you can find me at 360health4u.com, where I can help you select some wonderful wellness products because you deserve the highest quality products as you're building your wellness plan.
And we hope you will visit our bookstore at healthgeekspodcast.com.
And opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and are not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted, and no part can be reproduced without the expressed written consent of Kristen and Eleanor.